Welcome back to another episode of the Friday Forge podcast. I apologize for the 2-week gap between episodes. I was fighting an illness last week, but I am glad to be back with you today. If you're new to this show, welcome. This is a weekly show where we talk spiritual ideas. Our subjects may include those currently on our hearts, in response to events in the American culture, or topics following a series. If you're a returning listener, thank you so much for choosing to listen again today. I truly believe that God has a plan for each and every one of us, and I hope that He can speak to you today. I like to start off every episode with a little bit of prayer. Now, we do take prayer requests on this show. If you would like to leave us a prayer request, you can do that in the YouTube comment section. If you're listening on Spotify currently, please use the link in the description to go to YouTube and to leave a comment there. Now, we don't have any prayer requests this week, but I will lead us in prayer over today's show as a whole. So please, wherever you are, bow your heads, close your eyes, as we enter a time of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to witness today. May you speak your truth through me. May you open the hearts of all of those listening today to receive you and your love. May joy and peace overcome us, and may we diligently strive towards understanding you and your word. In Jesus' name we pray all of these things. Amen. Today we'll be starting a new series where we delve into Ecclesiastes. I'm not exactly sure yet how I'm going to divide it up, but likely this will be a 4-part series. I will say that this series will likely be a little bit different than prior episodes we've had. It will have a lot more reading and analysis rather than paraphrasing and life application, although I assure you it will have still some good application. I ask that you bear with this new format though, as not every episode will follow this format, and not every episode will be done the same way. Perhaps you will take away something different today than you have in the past. Perhaps you could benefit from this. All right, to start, we're going to read Ecclesiastes 1. After the chapter, I will recount what I think are the important points of that chapter. Now, something to keep in mind is that the structure of Ecclesiastes is pretty unique. Ecclesiastes is written by King Solomon, and it's sometimes referred to as one of the books of wisdom, which are just books that Solomon wrote. In it, Solomon describes his journey of understanding of the meaning of life. So let's start off with chapter 1. All is vanity. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south, and it goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has been already, in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things, yet to be among those who come after. The vanity of wisdom. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to know madness and folly. But I perceive that this is also but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Now that we've read chapter 1, what are some of the key ideas from it? Well, I think the main takeaway is that God is in control of all things. The world doesn't run by our own timing or our own rules, but His. God created the natural world, the processes that it goes through. He created the passage of time. And Solomon is slowly moving closer to the understanding of God's power by analyzing the futility of human life. Our actions and our histories are ultimately insignificant in the scheme of eternity. The first step to finding something greater in life is recognizing what pure human existence is lacking. And that, I think, is the step that Solomon is taking here. He's recognizing the void that is left when humans are left to their own devices. He's recognizing the lack of purpose that life seems to have. And he hasn't yet figured out that that's where God's coming from. Or at least he hasn't in the terms of this study that he's doing. Of course, Solomon was the king of Israel. He honored God and he followed God. But for the sake of Ecclesiastes, it's almost as if he's relearning all of these things. And I think that's what makes it such an interesting book, is that it's almost a study as a case for God. All right, let's move on to chapter 2. Vanity of self-indulgence. I said in my heart, "Come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself." But behold, this was also vanity. I said of laughter, "It is mad," and of pleasure, "What use is it?" I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept from my heart no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. The vanity of living wisely. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise and of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies, just like the fool. And so I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after wind. The vanity of toil. I hated all my toil, in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all of which I have toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my laborers under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of his heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he has given the busyness of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This is also vanity and striving after wind. Now you'll notice that after Solomon has analyzed the void in his life, he's slowly beginning to go about different ways to fill that void. At first in the chapter, he pursues self-service. He engages in all manner of personal pleasures, all of the worldly things that we're told we're supposed to want, given our material mindset. But none of this actually left him filled. It was merely a distraction from the void in his life. There was still an existential lack of more, of purpose and of meaning. So then instead he turned to wisdom and understanding of the world. Perhaps if he lived with a discipline, it would change his perspective. And yes, of course, he found benefit to this. As a man who could see past oneself, he was able to find more to gain in life. He was able to retain his wisdom and his dignity. But at the end of it, the void is still present. And I think that void is symbolic of the unmistakable insecurity that comes from analyzing eternity, especially when you analyze eternity and you know that you have no place in it. Solomon is recognizing that all of the people in the world will meet the fate of death. It is only then that Solomon begins to finally see God's presence in the world and to find joy in his life. He recognizes that there's a balance between hard work and also the pleasures of rest. But he also is recognizing that it takes God as the answer to the question of purpose and meaning to fully experience this balance. The balance between hard work and pleasure means nothing without a purpose for any of it. Solomon is able to delve deeper into this in chapter 3, so let's read chapter 3 before we continue. A time for everything. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to tear, and a time to sow. A time to keep silence, and a time to speak. A time to love, a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. The God-given task. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in his toil, because this is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it, so that the people fear before him. That which is, already has been. That which is to be, already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. From dust to dust. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, and that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beast, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust. All to dust will return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what he will be after him? At the start of this chapter, Solomon refers a bit back to chapter 1 and the natural order of the world, but at this time he goes a step further, and he claims that our own human lives follow a natural pattern as well. There is a time for all manner of emotions and actions and struggles in our lives. But the way that he differentiates those who work for God and those who work for themselves is this. Those who work for God aren't exhausted by the seasons of life, because we joyfully see them as opportunities that God has in store, and that there simply has to be a change in atmosphere and environment for us to experience it. And those who serve God are meant to have a joy through their life. As it stands without God, Solomon discovers that life is completely meaningless, and that is why toil is so painful. That's why everyday life is so mundane, is because ultimately it adds up to nothing. But when Solomon recognizes that life is both a gift and a calling from God, that's what makes it both enjoyable and what makes it fulfilling and fruitful. There's also security in that. Because Solomon notes that righteousness is found nowhere but in God. People are flawed, and even our just systems of law can sometimes be broken and also be, well, unjust. Only submitting to God's perfect authority can circumvent our flawed morality. We can live understanding that God has a purpose for each and every one of us, and we can agree to follow his commands, even without understanding why. It has been extremely illuminating to go through these chapters of Ecclesiastes today and see Solomon's thought process that leads him to essentially make a case for God. He starts off with the absence of God, recognizes a void, tries to fill the void with worldly things, and then comes to realize that only with God can it be fulfilled. But interestingly enough, life is made meaningful through worldly things, through our joys, through our sorrows, through one another even. But it's only when we understand God behind all of it that it becomes meaningful, that toil in our life is given purpose. It's only satisfying when we know that it's for a purpose. We can only endure pain and suffering and struggle and hardship when we know that it works towards a greater goal. We don't even need to know what that greater goal is. We will likely never fully understand God until we reach heaven, and even then, it's questionable how much we'll understand. But what we do know is that God does have a plan, and we put faith in that, our struggles become worth it. We're also more able to experience our joys because we understand that God is giving us these blessings and these rewards and these moments of rest, and that we're meant to enjoy them. It's been extremely interesting to watch Solomon describe a process of coming to that conclusion, and I'm very interested to see what he has written in later chapters as we continue this next week. Well, thank you all so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed, please show us some love and drop a like. We host the show on both Spotify and YouTube, so please share links to either one of these platforms and help spread the word of our show. You can feel free to leave any suggestions for future episodes in the comment sections on YouTube. And thank you once again for supporting this show. I really hope that you found today's content insightful and that God was able to speak to you through it and teach you something new. And I pray that God will bless you this week. Have yourselves a great day, and remember, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another.